First, I just want to thank the organizers here at Excel Advise for asking me to join. It's my pleasure to talk about this topic. It's very near and dear to my heart, so I love making interactive spreadsheets. And we'll, in a moment, talk about what I mean by that, but I just want to thank the organizers and planners for inviting me on and sharing this knowledge with you. So let's get started. So just a little bit about me. I am a Microsoft Excel MVP. I'm working on the book, Dashboards for Excel. It's coming out in August of this year. I also run the website Option Explicit VBA. You can find it at optionexplicitVBA.com. And I'm also the co-host of the YouTube series Excel TV. And you can, we're working on the .com name for that, but you can find it if you go to YouTube and search for the Excel TV. We have the Excel TV channel up there, and it's just a series on really Excel, and we joke and we interview some great guests. So make sure to check that out. And I also do training consulting, so I have to do a shameless plug. So before I get started, so just looking ahead, we're going to answer these questions. So really, what skills and practices are necessary to make an awesome Excel application? So here I say interactive spreadsheets, and I'll sometimes call them awesome Excel applications too. But the most important takeaway from all this is that of unconventional thinking. So why is unconventional thinking important to Excel? So if there's anything you should take away from this lesson, isn't just the applied concepts, but also this idea of unconventional thinking, because we need to think differently to do things differently in Excel. And we'll touch upon how we do this. So we're going to talk about the best formulas to get the job done. We're going to do a little data visualization. And we're going to dabble into decision support, because at the end of the day, this is about making something for decision makers, and that is what decision makers need, is decision support. And hopefully everyone's really excited about this next animation here. So there's not going to be any VBA in this. This is by design for this class, because VBA is, while very, very useful, it's not always necessary, and this is what I'm talking about when it comes to unconventional thinking. In fact, just a real quick anecdote, one time I did this presentation, actually I did it at the Pentagon in the United States, and they had named this class Advanced VBA, and there was no VBA in it, but many people think you can't do these very advanced things and interactive things in Excel without VBA, but you can, and I want to talk about ways we can do that. And I think when we sort of move away from VBA, at least in these examples, you'll see that you can build things rather quickly and rather complex things rather quickly. So one thing I always try to touch upon, and this really, we won't go into it too much depth in this presentation, but it is important to have good visualization. If you want to see good examples of visualization, chandu.org has great examples. Obviously, Stephen Few, who is the dashboard expert, and you can see his work at perceptualedge.com. So you'll see those in an applied sense, but that's kind of a presentation for another day. Also, today we will sort of be talking about these good development practices, and you'll see that as manifest in the formulas that we use. So we want to develop optimized and efficient spreadsheets, and this is really one of those times when VBA may not always necessarily be the best answer, because you can do anything in VBA, but it doesn't necessarily mean you should, and often using formulas can make a faster product. So I always say this, think outside the cell. So I don't know how many are familiar, if you remember, think outside the box is that term about how we think of things differently. So I've sort of repurposed this and said think outside the cell to make it sound, to make that pun on the cell with Excel. But we really want to think unconventionally, so we want to think outside the box. So the question is, what do we expect from these tools? So we want a spreadsheet that organizes information so it's easy to read and interpret. The information should be presented visually, and this is pretty important. So there are only things that we can see with our eyes, that only certain patterns we can see quickly with our eyes that we can't necessarily see with the data by itself. So we want to present it in such a way as to take advantage of those subconscious abilities that we have to understand data. So, and the other last piece here is that we need to make this data actionable. So you need to be able to do something with it, and it needs to be ready for decision makers. So many people ask me, so how is this different from your normal, say, budget spreadsheet? So again, coming back to this idea of unconventional. So we use Excel formulas in a both unconventional way. So here we're talking about dashboards. So we use them in the construction of, and you'll see this when we do examples, we're going to use these formulas in the construction, not just sort of the analysis of data, but we're going to use it to build something that turns into sort of the edifice, the construction of the product. So I know I've said a lot of words there, but you'll see this in practice in only a few moments. So the other thing, we want to keep unnecessary operations at a minimum. So if we had longer, we would talk about at length about volatile formulas. Volatile formulas are ones that always recalculate when there's certain volatile actions, but that trigger those recalculations. But often they are the reason why a spreadsheet is slow. So if you have a lot of volatile formulas, and examples of those are offset and indirect. If you have a lot of those, you're going to end up slowing down your spreadsheet. So what we want to do is use sort of the best formulas for the job. Now, does that mean that we never use offset or indirect? Not necessarily. It just means that we don't maybe use it for everything. So we try, when it's a good idea to use it, we'll use it, and when it's not, when we have a better alternative, we'll use those alternatives. So finally, we really want this to be speedy and user-friendly with real-time data. These are not qualities often associated with Microsoft Excel. So you know, a lot of people think Excel is slow, and that's how we have to accept it, and that there's all these other type of applications out there in .NET and web development that are much faster, and that's really what kind of like a mature system might use. But that doesn't necessarily have to be true. So if we know what we're doing in Excel, we can make something fast, and we can make something speedy, and we can make something that our managers really like. And you know, delighting our managers is a great thing to do. So as I always say, think outside the cell. So think unconventionally. Think about how we could do things differently. So many of you have probably seen this before. It's kind of the age-old puzzle. So I have these 9 dots here, and I say link all 9 dots with as few connected straight lines as possible. So how many lines can we do? So I'm just going to save you the trouble if you're writing this down, and I'll just save you the trouble and do the puzzle for you. So here we can do it in 5 lines. So can we do it in fewer? Well, we can do it in fewer if we sort of think outside this box that we have here. So, you know, I never said you couldn't make a corner here. So this is sort of the usual answer to this. So this is how you can do it in 4 lines. But in fact, we can also do it in 3 lines if we don't go through the centers of these dots. We can do it in 1 line if we move the dots. So here we're violating all these conceptions that we had. And then we could even, some people say this is cheating, but we can go to no line, and that is to touch all the dots together. So this example that I'm pulling here is actually not my own. It comes from Professional Excel Development by Boulin, Bovey, I can't remember the authors. I'll mess that up. But Professional Excel Development is a great Excel book, and it has a whole chapter on how to optimize and think differently. So this isn't just a rote exercise. This is something that they even encourage in their book to think differently about how to do things in Excel. So just here's a real quick review. So we know most of us should really have a good understanding of the if formula. You have that logical test, which makes up the first parameter, and then the next 2 parameters are what are returned depending on that logical test. So we know if it evaluates to true, in this second parameter here, this is what will be returned. If it evaluates to false, this is what will be returned. So we're going to do a real quick challenge, and I'll just take about a 2-minute break. So if you just want to take a look at this challenge and maybe write down, and you can even chat into the chat box what you think the answer is. So if I say, so I want to write a formula such that if cell A1 is less than 20, then you want to multiply the value by 1. If it's greater than 20 but less than 50, multiply it by 2. Greater than 50 but less than 100, multiply by 3. And if it's greater than 100, you want to multiply by 4. So just take a minute and jot down how you might want to do that. And feel free, by the way, I should just say, if I'm going too quickly or if you feel puzzled or anything like that, feel free to ask me a question or type in the chat box, slow down, and I will slow down, and we will deal with something head on. We might have to take questions afterward, but I think we can mostly handle them as they come in. So just take a moment and think about how you would do that. Okay. So hopefully that was time enough. So most of us would probably have thought to do the nested ifs response. So this is the pretty typical answer, and I imagine several people thought to do this. But there's actually also another way, and you may have seen this while reading other tutorials online. Sorry about that. Let's move that out of the way. So that is with Boolean logic. And with Boolean logic, we'll just step into that right now. So let's take a closer look at this. Let's say A equals 51. So this is our first line of the formula. We're going to put that 51 into the A1 spot. So you see that I've done that here. So we see 51 is greater than 20. So we know that that's true. 51 is greater than 50. We know that that's true. 51 is is not greater than 100. So what happens next in Excel's brain? So what is Excel thinking about when it does this? So it literally is going to say, oh, that's true, that is not true. Now here's the fun part about how Excel thinks. Now you can use the values true and false on your spreadsheet, and Excel has a way to flexibly say a true is equal to 1 and a false is equal to 0. So in this instance, because we've placed these conditionals in a formula surrounding by parentheses, it knows that I want to treat this both as a true and false conditional, and also as the operands 1, 1, and so it'll translate false into 0. So basically, we start from here. I'm just going to go over this real quick because I feel like I'm going through it very quickly. So we input that A1. This is what Excel is thinking. It's going to put that 51 value into each one of these, and then if it operates to true, it's going to think these are true. And when it does its next step in the calculation, it's going to actually turn these into numbers. So true equals 1, false equals 0. Pretty simple logic there. So it's going to add up these ones, so 1 plus 1 plus 0 plus 1 in the end, and that actually gives us the same answer. So let's just go back real quick. So these two answers, or these two formulas, are exactly alike. So this is sort of one of those unconventional ways of doing things in Excel, and we're going to actually use that logic as we go on. So what's the difference? So Boolean logic is treated as a simple calculation, which makes it lightning fast. So if you have an if, you're creating a condition. So the stuff of ifs is that it's not treated as a calculation. It's treated as this sort of conditional logic Excel has to walk through, and it's not as easy in some cases. So when you treat something as a calculation, Excel says, oh, I know how to do addition, I know how to do subtraction, I know how to do multiplication. So these are things that I can do quickly. So there are some advantages to using Boolean formulas because they are very, very fast. So Excel 2007 and beyond, so I should say Boolean logic isn't limited to how many tests you can do. Earlier versions of Excel, limited ifs to 8, although I would say if you have 8 ifs, so 2007 increased that. In this presentation was originally, I made it in 2007, so I should really say 2007 and beyond increases that to 74. But let's be honest here, if you have more than 8 nested ifs, you probably have something wrong with your formula. So the real question everyone is asking is, which one should I use? So I always say, as a very, very, very general rule, you should use the formula you most readily understand. So the question is, someone say, well, I'm more comfortable with ifs. Excuse me, I just learned about these Boolean things today. I'm just going to stick with ifs because it's what I know. So, readily understand could be interpreted multiple ways, and I see that people will sort of justify the old logic. So the real question is, which is more readable, the top nested ifs or the bottom Booleans? And I would argue that the bottom one, the Booleans, is actually more readable. And in fact, you can sort of, while looking at it, you can see conditionally what is happening. So I would argue in some cases you'd want to use that Boolean. Now if you're throwing something together real quickly, Boolean versus if, it's not going to amount to much of a difference. But this is something to think about, not just in terms of spreadsheet speed and calculation, but also in terms of when I come back to this later, am I going to understand what's going on? So this top one, I actually would say I don't understand it as well as I understand the bottom one. But perhaps that's just me. But this is something that we really need to think about. So let's dive into some of these examples real quick. So I'm just going to read you this scenario description. So I say the cost of producing widgets has been rising due to increased manufacturing costs. However, you've discovered a process modification that will save your company lots of money in the long run. And who does not like saving money? Everyone likes saving money. So your boss loves it, and he should because you're saving him money. And he asks you to create an Excel spreadsheet that will easily allow him to see the changes. So, you know, you're very new to Excel, and you're saying, oh, how do I do this? How do I make this how do I make it so I can easily see the changes? So we're going to talk about how to create this spreadsheet real quick. And I have most of the edifices, or most of the devices to create this already in place. So we're going to just create the pieces of it. So let me just show you how this works. So we have original cost of goods sold for the widget. And then when I hit show savings, this is our new cost of goods sold. And as you can see, it does increase, but we are recognizing a savings that's given by this dotted line. So how do we show that? And how do we make this? And remember, there is no VBA in this. So we're going to just jump over to the example real quick and talk about how to do it. So the first thing is I've created this checkbox. And, you know, I'm going to just delete this real quick because I like making things from scratch. So I'm going to go to this developer tab. And if you don't have the developer tab, we can talk about how to get it. So you go to the Office button, Excel options. So if you're running 2010 and before, you go to Popular and say Show Developer tab and ribbon. And I'm just going to show you how to do it over here. So what you would do in Excel 2013 is you go to Customize ribbon and you would check it to make sure that it's on. So 2013 changed it a little bit. So let's jump back to the presentation. So we're going to talk about the form control checkbox, and I'll show you how to add that. We're also going to talk about named ranges. So just jumping back to the form control checkbox real quick. So one of these cool things that happens is that you can link these checkboxes. You can link them to cells, and they're going to return a true or a false. And you may be thinking to yourself, aha, true or false, I remember that. That came in to the example Jordan just showed me. So this is what's really cool, because just in those just how true and false can equal 1 and 0 in the example we showed you, we can actually use it here without any VBA to create the interactive spreadsheet that we've always dreamed of. So I'm going to also show you how to do named ranges. This may be something that many of you already know, but I particularly like named ranges, so we'll just talk about that. So let's just jump to it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to insert a new checkbox, and you can see that from the Insert button on the Controls group. Here's the form control. We're going to stay away from this bottom group. Now, these are ActiveX's, and that's a discussion for another day. But these form controls are very nice, very lightweight, very easy to use. So let me just drop one right here. And, you know, I actually see that there's some chat messages that were going on. I want to make sure that I've addressed them. Okay, I see. So cool. So I'm glad people enjoy that logic. So here I'm just going to say, I'm going to type in show savings. You always want to type a nice caption here. So one cool thing is I can link these checkboxes as I was discussing. So if I right-click it, I can click Format Control, and there's a cell link here. And I have already sort of created this table here to keep track of the information on my interactive spreadsheet. So I'll click here, and now you see that up here it says equals E16, excuse me, and that will tell me that it's linked. So now I've clicked this, it says true, false, true. You can see that when it's true, when I've selected this, it goes to true. When it's unselected, it goes to false. So it's pretty easy logic, and you can actually, just as a shortcut, you can bypass everything. If you right-click it, so let me show you that again, right-click, and then you see that this context menu goes up, but I'm just going to click on it again to ignore it. I go up here and hit E or equals. I'll select this, and so that's a quick way to do it, and that always sort of saves time, because when you get to form controls, there may be not the checkbox so much, but the scroll bar, which we'll be talking about in the next example. Just doing that for a lot of them, it gets kind of time-consuming to go into properties. So it's a cool change. So you can see here that I have that it's true or false. So the question is, what are we going to do with that? So if I'm showing the savings, right, I want to show this information here. So here, this graph isn't linked to anything. In fact, I'm just going to do this real quick copy and paste just to show you it. This is not tied to anything. So if I change this, nothing is happening. So what I want to do is I want to make it so that the information that feeds into the graph is going to be tied to this information here. So I could do that on the normal data, on the raw data, but it's always advisable not to do that on the raw data. So in fact, this is sort of the development pattern that I always talk about in other courses, that we have our raw data, we have our transformation layer, and then we have our presentation layer. So this separates, you might call it a separation of concern, because what we're going to do is operate on this data, but we'll never really change it. And then this presentation layer is going to pull from this transformation table. So for those of you who've done any other programming, this may be similar to the model view controller framework, very popular in .NET architecture. So this is something that we're going to borrow and use for Excel, and you'll see that it actually works out very well. So if I want to show the savings, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say this is going to be equal to this, because remember, this is the raw value, and we're going to multiply that by this show savings down here. But I actually want to make it really easy for myself. So I'm going to go up here to this named range, and I'm going to say is showing savings. So that means when it's true, so that I've named it in such a way, when it's true, we can think of it when it's showing savings, semantically, when this is true, it makes sense. So I hope everyone understood that the way I said it. I guess I kind of used some geek speak there, but the idea is that we want to name variables in such a way as they sort of describe what they do. So many people want to use Hungarian notation, say V. So some people might say V. Show savings. I like to name in the more modern typing, so the type I'm using is often the ones used in .NET. So they always say is true, is has variable, so is visible, things like that. So what I'll do is I'll get to it. I'll multiply this, and then now you can see that when I come back later, I can get an idea of what's going on. I'm multiplying this value over here, E3, by the variable that tells us whether it's showing or not. So this is just one way we can think of, say, I want to come back to this later. I want to make sure I understand it. So using named ranges helps us out with that, because I know, it's not just me. I'm sure there are people out here who come back to their spreadsheets or have been given spreadsheets by other people and have sort of wondered, whoa, what is this? I don't know what's going on. So always good to use name ranges and to name them accordingly, so that when you come back, there's less frustration. And we're going to just do the same thing to this area over here. I'll just double-click that to fill it in correctly. So over here, what are we going to do? Well, we actually want this information from the cost of goods sold for the widgets. We don't want it to show when this is selected. So we need to take the opposite of true. So what's the opposite of true? It's false. The opposite of 1, in this case, 0. So how do we get that opposite? We're going to use what's called not. So I'll multiply this. I'm going to say not. I'll click down here. You see that it's not is showing savings. So this sort of gives us an idea of when it should show. So this information, we would think of it as showing, and I'll just drag down here. So it's based on this idea of calling this is showing savings. We could think of this as being flipped on when the savings is being shown. And we could think of this as being flipped on when it's not being shown. So in this way, we've created our own sort of mini language that we can read the spreadsheet with later. So let me just show this to you from a data perspective. You can see that these are switching. So this is exactly what we want to happen. So how do we change it so that the graph can pull from it? Well, the way to do that is, in this case, we can just pull from this table instead of the raw one. So let me just show you. You see this is happening real quick, and then we can actually add the other items. Here, what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this here. Sorry about that. paste it on. You know, when you do this with the keyboard, sometimes you get your fingers all jammed up. So let's see if that made it on there. It doesn't look like it did, so I'm going to just try that again. Control-C, paste it on here. So we don't really see anything because it's not showing. So now we actually do see something. You see that? So, you know, we want to make it nice looking. So what I'll do here is I won't fill this at all. I'll put a nice dotted line around it because, hey, you know, you want to really show that it's a savings. It's not really there. So we'll just choose a really thin one. And then here we'll make this about the same color as the other one. I always kind of mess up with the colors, so we'll go back here. And now you can see this dynamic is working. And we probably want this chart down here to pull from selected months that we're interested in. See, now look at that. That's a real fancy chart. So you can see that it's happening instantaneously, and guess what? No VBA. So I love VBA, don't get me wrong, because the name of my blog is Option Explicit VBA, but look, no VBA. We created this awesome dynamic of interactivity. So something else we want to do. So we also probably want to add a title onto this. So here's one way we can do it, because we want the title to switch based on what's been selected. So remember, we're always going to be thinking of this. So there's multiple ways to do this. So I'm going to just first show you the if way. So everyone knows if, and that's obviously, you know, we talked about should we do this or not. So we could say if showing savings, and we want it to say cost of goods sold, or cost of goods for widgets with improvements. Otherwise, we just want it to be the regular one. So we can see that this is working right here. And real quick, I'm going to just show you how to add a chart title that's linked. So I'll go to quick layout here. Or I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. I should go to chart title here. I'm going to click above chart. And then here I'm going to just, so having already had selected this chart title, I'm going to click down here. And you can see now it's linked. I don't particularly like how it moves over like that, but that's the new Animation Excel 2013 ad. So if I move it over, it won't jump around. So just to recap how I did that, if you add a title, often it's going to add a standard title. Because this is an example and it was actually already preset, usually you'll get something that looks like that when you add a title. So then you type in what you want. You know what, let's just delete that and design it from scratch. You know, when I do this out and when I do this and people are watching, so this is the first webinar with it, you know, I can easily see people's faces, but now I can't. So I like to repeat things just to make sure that we get what's going on. So here we have the chart title. I'm going to click up here, hit equals, and I'll select down here. And look how easy that is. Don't you feel it? I feel like a chef right now. I'm describing how to do this. So look how easy and great that is. So this is how we did it with if. I just want to take a moment because we talked about Booleans and talk about, well, how do we do it with something that isn't a Boolean? So one thing we can use is the repeat function. We're going to actually talk about repeat function later here, but you know what repeat does is you supply it a text and then you say how many times to repeat it. Well, we know that 1 is equal to true and 0 is equal to false, so we can just supply that. Now we may actually have to do some modifications on that. Let me just make sure that, let's see if that's the case. Nope, we don't have to do any modifications. Sometimes Excel is going to try to treat it as a true or a false rather than a 1 or a 0. And in those cases, you want to convert it to a value. So you can use what's called the value function, or this is actually a neat trick I learned. If you do that minus before it, that will actually change it. So here, what we can say is we only want to repeat that once, and then we could put down our alternative one here, and we're going to repeat that when it's not the case, right? So. And that's that's an alternative way to do it. No ifs, no branching condition. Now, if you were to look at this, yes, a chef with really tasty food. Thank you. Now, if you were to look at this, you would say, I don't know what's going on. So here, you know, an if may be the better option. But this is something to think about. And remember, there's always different ways to do the same thing. So this is what I always want to try to talk about. Think outside the cell. Think unconventionally, and you can do some really cool stuff. So let's jump back to the presentation. So here we're going to talk about what I've called the tornado data visualization. I've used this for several examples. It's basically based off of real tornado data that I've received, that I pulled from online. So here's the made-up scenario. Your boss at the Weather Service has given you a data set with the total tornadoes reported each month. So 1950 to 1994, that's going to be 45 values in all. Your boss, would like you to create a dashboard that shows the total tornadoes per year and a monthly breakdown of the data for any selected year. So what we're going to talk about here is the form control scroll bar. So I talked about that a little bit before. We're going to talk about the index function. The offset function, which is pretty similar to index. So offset is volatile, and it can slow your spreadsheet down. So if you have a chance, you should really look to use the index function. But I kind of like it in this example because I think it drives a really good point home. We're also going to talk about the repeat function. So I guess I got ahead of myself. I got really excited and thought, well, I'll show them the other way to do it. But we'll talk about that. So form control scroll bar, it's so similar to that checkbox. You just link it to Excel. Here, PowerPoint has let me drag this one. I'm not really sure why, but very similar. You can link it to a cell, and as you change the value here, the cell will update. And you'll see that in 1 minute. So index, many of you have seen this before, but for for those who have not yet, you supply it a reference. So here I'm supplying it A2 to C4, and then you're going to supply it a row number and a column number. So in this case, I've supplied it the row 3 and the column 3. So here's what I wanted to make the point here, because you may be looking at this and saying, oh, wait, that's row 4. Well, remember, we're always going relative to the range reference. So in this case, this is the reference in our dotted line, and so we're going to say row 3 within that reference and column 3. In that case, it's going to return a 4. And then offset is actually very, very, very similar. So offset works in the same idea of rows and columns, but rather than supplying it a range, you supply it sort of an anchor, a starting point. So in this case, I want to say, I want to go 3 rows from my current starting point of A1. So I'm down here, and I want to move over 2. So that, in that case, I'm going to still return a 4. So you can see both of these are equal in the way they can return information, and for the most part, they're pretty much overlapping in what you want them to do. You can choose one or the other. And so then finally, the repeat function, which you saw, and here's just a quick example. If I wanted to repeat A 6 times, I could do it like that. So let's jump over to our tornado data example. And what I'm going to show you here is I'm going to show you the final. So the final is going to look like this, and we're going to create this in only a matter of minutes. So remember, no VBA. And I tell people that in their eyes, they start crying. They're so happy that there's no VBA. Because some people don't like VBA. I like VBA, but only when it's used for the good stuff. So we're going to go over here back to our developer tab. Developer tab is kind of like our chef's kitchen, and now we're going to pull out one of our fancy sharp knives, which is this scroll bar. So I'm just going to size it out, kind of make it look like the paddle is right up at that line. That's me just sort of being neurotic about it. So what we want to do is make this value of this scroll bar affect values on this chart. So it's very similar before. So we're going to actually create a new series, and that's going to change with the scroll bar. So task 1 with that scroll bar is to set it to somewhere on the sheet so we can remember it. And usually when you set things for the first time, the values don't appear. So it's really only within the changes do the values appear. And then part 2 of this is going to be, well, I'm going to right-click and I see, well, we have a current value of 9. We have a minimum value of 0. Well, this is never going to be a 0, so that won't work for us. So let me change that to a 1. And then I'm going to go to the maximum value, and I know there's 45 items here, so I'm going to change that to a 45. Excuse me. You can sometimes go without 3D shading. I don't think it actually makes a difference here in Windows, in the latest version of Windows, but sometimes it looks better without that 3D shading. So just a real quick demonstration. You see as I drag this, it changes. So how do we take those changes and we put them on here? So let's talk about what the back-end data for this is. So you see it's being pulled from A60, A50 from tornado data. So that's all of this information in the back end of here. So you see all of this here. And what's being plotted on that chart is are these years. So those are our X's. And then we also have the total tornadoes for those years. So those are our Y's. So now that we actually have the scroll bar value, what could we use next? Well, we can use the good old index function. So remember, index works by you supply it array, and then you can supply it a set of row or column numbers to pull from. So if we have this array, we can just jump back here. You see all the years are here, and actually, I haven't given this a named range, but you should consider doing that if you go on and do this yourself, which I encourage you very much to do. So let's see that. Oh, look, see, it's changing. It's pulling the right years. So how do we do that? How do we pull the correct values? Well, we're just going to do the exact same thing over on the other tornado data on the side. So I'm going to do that. I'll hit F4, even though I'm not going to drag it anywhere. But since I know I wouldn't have wanted to drag it anywhere anyway, it's a good idea to do that. I just sort of do it by convention. I do it automatically. It's one of those things that you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth. This is one of those things I just do automatically. So how do we take this data and we map it onto here? Well, this is a scatter plot. So all we really need to do is we can add a new series. So we're going to call this selector. That's our little dot that's going to move. And we already know the current x and y, don't we? Yeah, because we just set it. So look, how great is that? Let me just delete this part. We're going to hit enter. So you see that the selector has been placed. You see that right there. We're going to hit OK. And now look at that. It's moving with our scroll. So I'm going to right-click this. I want to add a data label here. 550. That looks like a good one. So what we'll do is we're going to put it at the top because that's what I like. So let's see here. I clicked below accidentally. You can put it wherever you want. Remember, this is your spreadsheet. This is your recipe, so do what you want with it. So, maybe you want to make this smaller, bigger. I personally like this sort of red selector. Some people would like it to be black. This is all up to you, but you can see that automatically. I think automatically. Thanks for the compliments, by the way, Nora. I see them on the chat. I like looking over and seeing that. So you can see that it works, and I'm going to actually just drag it all the way just to make sure that we're not going off the chart. So if I made this too large, it would go off the chart, and we'd kind of get some funky data here. Let's actually just prove that for a second. So I'm going to change this to 46. That's outside of our viewing area. And you can see it went to ref. So we want to bypass those. We can do that by setting everything up correctly from the get-go. So the question here is, how do we pull in that tornado information? So we want to pull in information for each year. So, well, we actually have this index here. So this index here, remember, the scroll bar maps exactly to the rows we're interested in. So we can use offset in that case. So down here, I'm going to actually just say offset. And I'm going to provide the anchor reference. In that case, this is our header row. Again, it may be a good idea for you, rather than doing as I'm doing and using these selective addresses, to call this header row. So when you type in and you see, oh, well, that's referring to the header row. So how much do we want to go down? How many rows do we want to go down? Well, we know that because this is actually given by the scroll bar value. So what's going to happen? Let's see here. It says I entered too few columns in this, or too few parameters. That's because it's looking for a column one. Well, we're not going to offset any columns, so we're just going to put a 0 in there. So now you see it says value. And the thing is that the reason it says that is because we're pulling back more than one piece of data, right? Because we've selected a whole row, and we've said to offset it. So we're going to pull back something that looks and is the size of this selector here. So let me just make sure I get the correct size here. So it says 12. So we need to make something that's 12 long. Sometimes I like to do this just to help me out. Make sure that when I select it, I get the right size. So I'll just put out to 12 right here, right? So then what I can do here is I can just drag this all the way out. Now, you see that it's still kind of giving this weird response. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control-Shift-Enter. So let me go back real quick. So what it's providing here is not the correct answer, but Excel has not been told to return a large row of data yet. It's just being told to return parts of data. So you need to go up here when you are pulling from a large set of data, and you want it to return not one data point, but also a large set of data, sometimes of the same size. You have to go up here and hit Control-Shift-Enter. So you see these curly braces around here. Let me just jump out of that real quick. And you see that error it gave me. That is Excel recognized that I'm turning it into an array formula. So you see those curly braces. Those are telling me Jordan, this is an array formula. So that is what we're going to pull back, and that's going to fill our responses on the side. So I'm just going to delete this over here. And you can see that it's changing. It's pulling back the correct information. So now I want to get that information over here. So now this is interesting because remember, this information is going column-wise, and we want it to go row-wise. So what I can do here is I can say transpose. So actually what I'm going to do is I'll hit escape, and I'll select this whole thing here. So again, we're going to do another array formula. So I'm going to say transpose. And I'm going to select this whole thing here. Hit F4 on that. And you hit Control-Shift-Enter. And now you see that it's populated this over on the right. So now we have this information here. It's populating it over on the right. So how do we get those cool neato, neato as we Americans like to say, bars, these data bars over here? So what we're going to do is we're going to use this little trick that I think I first learned on chandu.org. So I'm going to actually use the pipe symbol. So if you're looking at your keyboard right now, and you see the enter button, you see above that there's that backslash. And then if you hit shift on that, there's that pipe symbol. So we're going to hit that. And we want that pipe symbol to grow based on the tornadoes that return. So you see, and up here, I've actually changed this font to be script 7. You can also use playbill 11. So I like to play around and show people. So you can actually also use, let's say, Arial for this, but you see that it comes up with these lines here. So to get that real collapsed effect, there's two that you can do, playbill and script. So playbill is a good one. Script is also a good one. Script kind of will grow for the whole, it'll encase the whole cell, so you don't have, a whole lot of space. So I'm just going to double click that, do that autofill. So now you see there's this issue here that these lines are too long. So what we can do is we can actually modify this. We can scale it back. So here I'm going to scale it back by 3. Remember, the way scalars work is you're not actually, everything's proportional to each other when you scale things. So here I am. I've created this really cool thing. I've created it very quickly, and I've not used any VBA. So how do we clean this up in the end? So I'm going to click this Q because it's outside the screen, and holding Control and Shift, I'm going to press right. That selects everything. Right-click on the top. I'm going to hit Hide. That'll hide that part, so we don't want anyone messing around in there. I'll do the same here because, the user doesn't need to see any of that. So I'll click this, Control-Shift down. We're going to hide that. Now you see that our selector disappeared, so that's not good. So we need to click Select Data again. We need to go to Hidden and Empty Cells. And we need to say Show Data and Hidden Rows and Columns. So there we go. And there we go. Look, our boss is just so happy with us that we made this really cool thing. We've been able to block off the sides so nobody clicks on anything we don't want. If we wanted to really turn this into a product, we could hide a lot more. But this is just sort of how you create an enclosed application. So we're going to jump to our next example, and it looks like we may run over a little bit on an hour on this, and I'll leave that to you guys to decide whether you want to go over the hour. So in our final example, we're going to talk about sort of doing this sensitivity analysis on weighted models. So, so if we have this analysis of healthcare systems that we want to do, and I've loosely based this off of the World Health Organization's study that they did in 2000. So I don't know if you remember the different rankings of countries. My country, United States, came in 37, which is not very good for us, unfortunately. But the data here is actually all fake that we're going to be using. So I've created some countries, I've created some fake data, but the thing that is real here is that the weighted model that they used was based on this. So they actually used health level, responsiveness, financial fairness, health distribution, and response distribution. In fact, they even use these weights that I'm using here. So we're going to be able to apply a real-world example in part to our example. So we've been tasked to perform a one-way sensitivity analysis on this data. And we'd like to see, as we change these weights, how does that change the country's ranking? So that means how important were these weights to a country's ranking? So this is what we, in my former job, when I was a consultant for the big defense companies, we called this an analysis of alternatives, which is a really long-winded way of saying that we're going to come up with a bunch of different options, and we're going to look at how do these score, and how do they score when we change your underlying factors that helped us score these options. So I'm going to just do a quick primer here on weighted sum models. If you find the math or something, if I'm going too quickly, please stop me in the chat box, and we will take a minute to go through it. So in this case, we have a series of countries that we can say are evaluated by a set of metrics. Super easy so far, right? So in this case, we have health level, health distribution. So I already showed you these metrics. The idea is that any country, given these 5 metrics, are going to have a score from 1 to 10 on them. So just let's say country A. So the health level, these are fake. Health level, we'll say give it a 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10 for distribution, 4 out of 10 for responsiveness. Responsiveness distribution is a 2 out of 10, and financial fairness is a 7 out of 10. So they did really well in the financial fairness. So let me take a drink of water here. So how are they doing? Well, in a weighted sum model, or at least this model is equally weighted right now, we would add these up, and I'm just going to add them real quickly. We would say it's doing 2, and the total score, the best score that they could get is essentially out of 5. So that is really the best they could do, and you can see that because if I went up here and I said, oh, this is a 10 out of 10, this is a 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, all the way through we'd have 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, which is equal to 5, I think, right? So this assumes everything is weighted equally. But in this case, we know that they're not weighted equally because we were told they were not weighted equally. So let's talk about if we multiplied them by their weights, we would see that the score is adjusted. And this is how we talk about importance in models. So, you have a score. A score is, say, we get a 3 out of 10. Your value is 0.3. So you put in a score and you come out with a value, and then you have a weight. And that weight says, how important is this to me? So how important is health distribution in this case? Well, I think it's, of the whole, I think it's a quarter important. So this allows us to sort of adjust these scores so that not everything is equal. So let's talk about one-way sensitivity analysis. So one-way sensitivity says, given these weights, can we vary one but keep the rest proportional to everything else? And what this allows us to do is give supreme importance to one while still carrying the assigned weighted importance to the other. So let's go next. So here's the question. What happens if to the weighted proportions if we increase the health level by 4%? So the best way to think about this is we have all our metrics here, correct? So one of them we want to change. So health level we want to change, and the ones we want to maintain are over here. So we have 2 groups: the one we want to change and the one we want to maintain. So we think to ourselves, the one we want to change is equal to 25% of the total, and the ones we want to maintain are 75% of the total. So what we're going to do is try to increase this while still keeping the proportions of these numbers overall to that 75%. So how do we do it? So we're going to borrow, or up there I say steal, but this is a family program, so we don't want to say steal. We'll keep things legal. We'll say borrow. So the only way we can borrow is by taking from something else. So if we want to increase health level by 4% to make it to 29%, the other group has to be decreased by 71% because the weights must always equal 100%. So how do we do that? So we're going to take our original weights from the groups that we want to maintain their proportions, and we're going to divide that to get their overall proportion to that 75%. So you can see here I've taken their weights and I've divided it by the overall proportion. Thanks for the nice comments in the chat. And I don't see any slowing down the chat, so I'm going to assume that everyone is following me. But I can go fast, so remember, let me know. So here I've divided them. So remember that these are the proportions to that 75%, to the other group. And I'm taking that proportion here, and I'm multiplying that by the new weight. So remember, though we've shrunk that 75% to 71%, we've actually still maintained the overall proportion of these while increasing the relative weight of the one we wanted to change. So these are going to be the new weights here. So these are the final weights, and you can see that they all add up to 100%. Now, isn't that great? That's what we love. We love to see that. So the question is, how do we make this in Excel without using VBA? And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to just talk real quickly, just to give you a heads up on this. So we're going to talk about the VLOOKUP function. Most of you are probably familiar with that because VLOOKUP is essential to Excel. So you can see here that I'm trying to pull out from this region, from this table. I'm trying to pull out the region north. So here I'm supplying the value. Here's the data range, and so I'm going to say what column do I want to return. Remember, that's what the third parameter here, and here the argument I placed in that parameter is a 2. So that means I'm going to find north on here, and I'm going to pull out the second column, what matches it in the second column. And here I've given the value of false, and for all our purposes we're going to use false here. So there's two types of sort of searches for VLOOKUP. For our purpose here, we're not really interested in the other type. We're going to put a false there to say we want an exact match with the north. So the other one function we're going to be really interested in here today is the large function. The large function essentially is supplied a range, a reference range, and then you're going to pull out what is the kth largest value, which is very mathematical sounding, but in this case I say, what is the second largest value in this range? And we see that that is a 3. So if I had put a 1 in there, it would have been a 9. If I would have put a 3 in this kth largest number, it would have pulled out a 2. And if I would have put a 4, it would have pulled out a 1. So it's pretty simple when you take a look at it. So let's jump to our healthcare analysis dashboard, and I'm going to just pull it over here. So I've done some of the work for us already. So we have these raw scores here that I've created for all these countries, and then we have these weighted scores. And here I've said health level weight, and you can see that this is being traced to whatever final percentage that we're going to put in here. And this is done for all of them already. So I've saved you some time. So let's talk about how this works. So it's probably a good idea to show you the end product first. So here I can drag the health level up, and these are going to change proportionally. And you can see visually how they've changed within the overall model, and then you can see on the side too that these low and high ratings are changing. They're changing rather quickly. So we're going to talk about how to do that. So the first thing that we're going to do is I've already created this scroll bar here, and you can see that it's linked to this top one. So what I need to do is create several more. So I've clicked it, Control-C, and then Control-V to paste. You got to love those keyboard shortcuts. And so I'm going to right-click this. See, it's already set to C4. This one, because I've copied and pasted it, it was set to C4. So we'll just have to go through and fix these real quick. This isn't necessarily a fun part about it, just going through and doing each one. But as Excel developers, we've come to learn that that's what you have to do. So this is going to go to C8. I'm going to hit Enter. It's selected. So you can see that these are changing within these scroll values are changing. But we have a problem because when you scroll up, let's just take a look at this one. So when I scroll up, it's actually decreasing. When I scroll down, it's increasing. So I don't really like that. I don't like that effect because overall we don't want that. We want the idea is that if you're scrolling up, you're going to be increasing. Scrolling down, you're going to be decreasing. So we know that the max value, because I haven't changed anything about these, is going to be 100 in this. So if I just do 100 minus, I can adjust that value. So now you can see that this is increasing while that's decreasing. And I'll just drag that down. Always nice to make your life easier. And then here I'm going to take the sum total of this. Okay, so how do we do that one-way sensitivity analysis effect? So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to say equals, and I'm just going to divide it by the sum total right down here. So I'll lock it in with that F4. Hit Enter again. You may consider making these named ranges. For our purposes, we're going to do the quick way, just because I see time is running out, and I want to make sure everyone learns how to do this, because this is a great thing to know how to do. So you can see that as I change these, and as they correspond to these different weights, they're going to change accordingly. So also remember, the idea is that everything has to add up to 100. So if I do a sum on this, oh, look at that, adds up to 100. Perfect, right? Because we're essentially normalizing, as the mathematical geeks like to say, onto this 287. So how do we take this here and link it to the front? So what we can do here, and I've actually already done the purpose of linking these, is we can just say this equals this right here, right? So we'll do that over here. Isn't this fun, watching me link stuff? So let me just do that final linking here, and boom. Works like a charm. Works exactly how we like. So it's going to do it immediately. If you have Excel 2010 and previous, it doesn't do this weird animation where it jumps down. I hope Microsoft gets rid of that. I kind of liked it when it was just sort of more fluid and organic looking. So okay, so over here we have our transformation table, which you remember I'm very fond of those. We always do our work on another table and then we bring it in. So we're going to talk about what we can do with this transformation table. So over here I've just created this kind of simple index. This is just useful to sort of let me know how many items I have over here. So let me just move over here real quick. So I'm going to actually just delete this just because I want to show in really detailed way how we can how this scroll bar is going to work. So I have this scroll bar over here I've already inserted. I'm going to go to Format Control, and I've actually already set the minimum and maximum values, and we'll talk about that at the end if anyone's still interested on how to do that. So here I've actually set it to this AC over here. You can see that. And now I'm going to hit, so remember, when you're going to do the scroll bar thing, the first one is always set to the scroll bar, and then the ones under it, you just say equal that plus 1, right? So you can see as this changes, it's actually going to change with it. So that's what we want. And I'm going to just drag this down because I know I want to take 15 out at any given moment and display it over here. So the next thing we want to do is pull them out in a sorted way. So I'm just going to delete this here. So the question is, how do we pull this out? How do we make this sorted, right? So if I jump over here, my final value for each country, I have it calculated. You can see it right here. Excuse me. So how do we take this and how do we get it in a sorted fashion without any VBA? Good question. So remember that large formula? Well, that's what we'll do. We'll use large. And remember, this is going from 1 through 15. As I take it down, it's always going to be increasing to the end of the to the total end of the list that we have here. So if I just do this large on that data set here, and I can drag that down, it's always going to be in the correct order. And you can see that happening right here. So now we want to pull the information back. And here I've used a VLOOKUP. So what we're going to do is I'll just recreate it here. And sometimes I keep it out because of different timings for different events. So I'll just keep that out here. And we're going to jump out. We're going to jump over here, and we're going to say, well, find this value. So see this largest, so what that large value is. So find that because we know that this isn't sorted over here. So find that in here in the final values. I'm going to hit F4 here to lock it in. Now here's what's really interesting about VLOOKUP. Remember I said you could pull back, well, let me resize this real quick. If you guys catch me making a mistake, you should let me know. So here you can see that this whole area here, I want to select it because I want you guys to see this. So we'll just do this again. I'll hit F4 to lock it in. So we want to pull back, we actually want to pull back the weighted scores for each of these. So we could do a VLOOKUP for each one. So here we know that this is in the 4th column. You can see that I put that index there. But you can also do something else. I accidentally hit enter on that. So, oh, well, look, it spoiled the surprise for us. So what you can do is you can actually pull down a set of, you can actually pull out a set of columns. So I'm going to start with a curly bracket here. And then over here I've actually, oh, Excel. It's saying it doesn't like that. So you got to hit that curly, you got to take that curly bracket off, jump back here. And then the column index, we're going to just add that curly bracket here. And we know that we want to pull, so I want to pull out the name, and I want to pull out the weighted score, and I want to pull out the responsive, I want to pull out the weighted score for responsiveness. So essentially, and unfortunately, this is this thing here is sort of blocking it. I actually learned this cool tip from Chandu. You can actually move this. Isn't that cool? I just learned that recently. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to pull out 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. So we want to pull out all the even ones, and I can just type that in here. 6, 8, 10, 12, and then remember we're going to use false here. So I'll hit enter. It says I can't change part of array because I already did it. So this is what's kind of weird about array type. So you see, I already made this here, and if I try to change it, it's gonna puke at me. So I'm gonna just delete it here. So what I'll do is I'll paste our formula back in. I'm gonna just pull across. Now remember, we're pulling 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. So how many we want to match the amount of columns that we're pulling back. We want that to match the total length of this set. So look, we have 6 columns here. I'm going to go up here. Remember that Control Shift Enter, hit Enter. It's pulling back the information that we're interested in. Okay, so how do we translate that information over here? Well, it's actually fairly simple because we already have this laid out. All I got to do is hit equals over here, select this guy. Now, would you look at that? It's already set. So over here, I've done some scaling, which we can go into if we have time later. But same idea. You know, we've done some scaling. I can scroll down, and you can see because this is already set to here. So I'll hit F2. You can see it's pulling out the name here, right? So look how great that is. All I did is put the information in our transformation table, and then I just pulled it from over there. So then we also, if you remember from this sheet, we also had these breakdowns. So how did one country do specifically per metric? So we're going to pull that information out. So what I've done here is in this drop-down, and if you've not used these drop-downs before, all you got to do is go to data. So I click that. I go to data validation. Click on that. I've created this list. I said 1.0 health level, 2.0 responsiveness. So why would I add that 1, 2, 3, and 4 in it to help me out? So this is really a cool trick that I learned. So you don't necessarily think of that as 1, 2, 3, and 4 things, but it makes sense here because you're pulling from a drop down. You're saying that this is 1 through 5 of our metrics. So I can go here and I can hit equals left. And remember, what left does is it's actually going to pull out. So if I supply a string to it, so I'm just going to write Jordan here, just as an example, and I say 1, it's going to pull out the first character. It's going to pull out that J. So look what happens. Look what happens in this drop-down I've created. See, 1 through 5, it's going to pull out that 1. And now we want to turn that into a value. So we can do that value function here. I'm actually just going to do that minus shorthand because I like that so much. And now you can see that it went from being over left aligned, which is usually what the default is for text, to right aligned, which is the default for numbers. So what we need to do is we need to pull that information out. You can see over here I've placed in here. So the question is, how do we take that 1 through 5 and pull it from here? Well, look, we've got this huge set of columns here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull, or I'm going to select this here as our range. And then I'm going to say, oh, look, I put this set of row indices here. So this will be our row number. So this will be our row number. And then our column number is going to be based off of that drop-down, which is going to be over here. So let's make sure we lock these in place. Close that off, and I'll just drag that down. And I don't really like when it carries the formatting. So let's see here. It didn't do what we wanted. And the reason it didn't do what we wanted is because I locked this in too hard. So let's we don't actually want it to lock the we only want it to lock the column and not the row. So we're going to just redo that here. Fix that. Do that fill without formatting is. You can see as I scroll down, so this is how each country performed, and this is how their breakdown performed. And now let's look. We change this drop down, and you can see that this number here has changed. So this is a kind of a cool little workaround. You know, it's kind of sneaky, right? You don't even think about it. And then you can see that as we change these weighted values, it happens quickly. Let's find a good example here that we see that. So Costa Rica was its score was very much based on responsiveness. So okay, so how do we do these top rated nations? So we're going to go back to our large again. So we know what the large values are. We're going to go back here, and we're going to select this entire list. So I'm going to hit F4 on that, go back to our healthcare example, and I'll just click this. So this is going to pull back the top values, but that's not really what we wanted, is it? So we want to know what corresponds to this. So I'll just do another VLOOKUP, right? So I'll do a VLOOKUP, and you can actually do an index match on this. So that is something that's up to you, but I'm going to wrap that value that came back around the VLOOKUP, and then I'm going to select this here. So we're going to select this whole range, and then when it finds the match, we want to pull out the second column like that. So you can see that Slovenia is at the top. I'll drag this down, and hey, look, you know, for our lowest rated countries, we already know what the bottom indices are. So I'll just copy and paste that. Ooh, it didn't like that. So let's find out why it didn't like that. Let's see here. You know, sometimes it's just easier to retype stuff. So I'll click this here. We'll click we'll go back to our data example. Hit F4 on that. And say, well, what's the kth one? So sometimes, remember, sometimes it's easier to do this in chunks. So first I pull out the large, then I'm going to do the VLOOKUP as we did before. Let me select this whole thing. We'll hit F4 on that, pull out the second column, make it false. No, I can't type today, right? That's because it's getting close to lunch for us in America. So I'll drag this down. You know how it is when you get close to lunch. So I just want to show you why didn't this work here, because I forgot to type false. You know, I made this big deal about false. That's why when I copied and pasted it didn't work. So made this big deal about false, and then I didn't even use it. So there you have it. And look, you know, we made this in a matter of minutes. You know, we made 3 awesome-looking interactive spreadsheets that a decision maker could use right away. And look, I mean, an hour has gone by. So isn't that great? Look at all this cool stuff you can do in Excel. If you think about doing it differently. Now, you see there's some remnants of my the old name of this was dashboard development. There's some remnants of that on my slides. So I jump back and forth. But so, you know, we did this all, no VBA. We had fun doing it, and we used only formulas. And so I encourage everyone to go out there and see what they can do, because there's always something new, always something to learn. Remember, think outside the cell. And if you have any questions about this presentation, and I'll send out the materials afterwards, feel free to contact me.
Jordan, there are a couple of questions if you click on questions tab, and if you could answer it.
Okay, so questions. Let's see here. You know, I'm new to this. I thought they would pop up under the. So where is the questions tab? Sorry.
A question mark. Click on question pair. Either you click on question pair.
Let me see here. I see drawing tools.
Below the mic, you have a question mark icon.
Below the mic. Let's see here. I see. I don't think I see a. You know, I signed in as a regular user on this.
Okay.
So I don't think I have that. So I see a video screen. So, but if you want to read them aloud, I can.
Okay. Well, what I'll do is that I'll type them out in the chat box.
Okay. Great.
So you can.
I'm good at Excel, but not good at GoToWebinar. GoToWebinar on how to use this.
Okay. So here's number 1. Did you receive it?
Let me see here. Any keyboard shortcut key for selecting form controls, or when we select it with only mouse clicks? Yes, there is a shortcut. Let's talk about that. So you hold Control. So you do have to select it with a mouse, but there is a way to do it without doing. Let me rephrase that. You can select it with a mouse, but you have to. You can do it without right-clicking. So if you hold Control and click, that is one way to do it. So as far as I know, I don't know if there's a way to do it without using a mouse. Let me see something here. I just had an idea. So if you go to Format, there's the Selection pane. So the thing is, Selection pane is kind of weird, because if I go to View here, it's not on here. So Selection pane is something that you're going to have to add to your Quick Access toolbar. But that is, I guess you still need to use your mouse for that. But if you do that, you can see that it's over here, and you can select it on the side. And this is also cool. I don't know if anyone uses Photoshop. This is very similar to your Photoshop style of hiding objects. You can make them visible or invisible. but unfortunately there's no purely keyboard way of doing it.
Okay. And this is all we got. There are several round of applauses for you, but questions are, this is the only question we had.
Oh, okay, cool.
So should we expect the spreadsheet so we can share with the participants?
Yes, I will
Okay.
send, I guess I assume I'll send it to you. I'll send you the
Okay.
spreadsheets, and you'll send them out to the
Okay.
attendees, or if I have the attendees' emails, I can
Right.
send them out.
Definitely we will share it. Right. Thank you so much, Jordan, for taking out time, and thank you all for attending the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
having me. We'll do it again sometime.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.